Hello there, world of tankers. I'm Blitz, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 4 picks for the worst premiums in the game. So of course, if you like this type of video, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, as it does help out the channel so much. Of course, if you have different opinions, please let me know in the comments down below what tanks you think are the worst. But without further ado, I'm going to get right into number 4. As you can see, in the number 4 spot, I have the WZ-111. Now this tank is in the number 4 spot. It's not really going to be anywhere higher because it's not necessarily a bad tank. The other vehicles in this list are really just poor performing vehicles. This tank isn't necessarily a bad vehicle to play. However, it's just not a good tank compared to any of the other premium tier 8 heavies you can get in the game. For example, if you compare this to the pretty much better counterpart in every single way, the Glacial's upper plate is around 290mm effective when you're aiming at the level of the tank. This one, well, it's about 250 at the most, and because it has those weird funky angles like the 111-5A, it goes up to about 220 at some of the spots. So really, it's a lot easier to pen the upper plate on this tank, where it does have some troll bounces. The Glacial doesn't need to have troll armor because its upper plate is so thick. As well, unlike the Glacial, this lower plate was never buffed on the vehicle, so it's still sitting at around 130mm effective. Even if you're angling that, the best you can do is probably going to get up to about 160mm. The Glacial, it's about 180 on the lower plate. With angling and everything else like that, you can probably get it up to about 200mm, which is really good for a lower plate. It's more like the WZ-112-2. So this tank, yeah, it doesn't have good armor going for it as well. The only advantage this has over the Glacial is a 3 km/h top speed buff at 35 over the 32 on the Glacial. So there's really no advantages over this tank. As well, you compare this to pretty much of any other IS series in the game, like the IS-5, the IS-6, the Object 252. All of those tanks perform a lot better statistically if you look on the 90 days of Blitz stars compared to this vehicle. There's literally no advantages to running this 111 over any other tier 8 premium heavy tank in the game, especially the Chinese counterparts and the Russian counterparts. Hitting the number 3 spot is the T-44-100, one of my least favorite tier 8 mediums in the game. Now the reason I hate this tank so much is just because it's literally a worse version than the T-44 in almost every single aspect. The T-44 has more damage per minute, it's got more gun depression, it's got a better effective power to weight ratio, it's only slower on the traverse speed by 3 degrees. There's literally no advantages to running the T-44-100 over the T-44, other than you get these little side panels, which you've probably noticed on the vehicle, that really only stop high explosive rounds and heat rounds, and really the only tank you'd have to worry about with those 2 rounds is probably a T-49. So yeah, it's not really stopping anything. They're about 15mm of armor, which means that, yeah, it's not really doing anything to add protection to the tank. As well, as I said, it has only 5 degrees of gun depression. The 44 is sitting at 7, which means you can be a lot more flexible. You can make that upper plate really troll in a 44. Your turret armor is actually pretty solid. Yeah, you're not getting that in the T-44-100. All the gun handling, the aiming time, on-movement turret rotation statistics are exactly the same. So what's the point of getting the 44-100? I honestly have no clue. I guess the only advantage is that you can earn credits in the tank, and it looks a little bit cooler in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. In the number 2 spot, we have the VK16801P. While this may be the heaviest tank by a lot at tier 8, it is definitely not the most armored, which is kind of contradicting. So, first of all, the frontal armor of this tank. The upper plate is actually pretty solid. It's about 300mm effective, which means that you're really not going to pen it, unless of course you are spamming premium rounds from the highest tier tank destroyers. But it's the lower plate that really makes it susceptible to penetrations. If you shoot the tracks at any angle towards the center of it, as long as you have around 220-230 pen, which, as we know, all tier 7 premium rounds and pretty much all tier 8 tanks have as standard, can easily penetrate through the front. As well, the side armor on this tank, because it weighs so much, it's quite a bit larger than the premium tech tree counterpart, the VK100. So the side armor on this tank is massive, and it's not angled at all, which means that it's very easy to get append. T-49s can easily get right through the side armor, it's weak enough to go through it. The rear of this tank, again, has no great angling, it's not very thick. Of course, it's not susceptible to high explosive rounds, but it's still very easy to pen with pretty much anything you are getting behind it, unlike the VK168. unlike the VK100-01P. As well, it's just a very ugly tank, but that's just half of it. You're looking at the turret armor as well. First of all, you've got that massive tumor, the cupola, sticking right out on the roof of it, and it doesn't work at all. It's only about 130 millimeters thick, which means that even stock tier 7s could easily penetrate that. I have no clue why Wargaming puts that on the vehicle, because it sort of defeats the purpose of having all of this armor, losing all of the speed and maneuverability, and you've got this huge tank that you'd expect, hey, it looks like a mouse. It has the turret that acts very, very similar to a mouse. You have to angle it, but again, the turret cheeks are only about 230 thick, which means that any premium rounds are easily going to get through it even at the toughest of angles. So it's a very easy tank to penetrate, and it's very ugly as well. I think this is one of the ugliest tanks that is in the game. I was actually very looking forward to seeing this tank come into the game because I like German super heavies. I'm just not a fan of this vehicle, and I'm guessing a lot of you guys already know that it is probably one of the worst tier 8s in the game. Before I do reach the number 1 spot, I wanted to throw the Panther 8.8 as an honorable mention. Now the reason this tank is in this list, it's currently not a terrible premium anymore. In fact, I actually liked playing it when I did test it out. But first of all, it has a stock Panther turret, which, as you can guess, isn't going to bounce much in a tier 8 battle. You can literally just shoot standard ammo right at the turret, and it's going to pretty much damage it every single time. But that's not the biggest issue. The big issue with the tank is that when it first came out, this tank was $50, and they've never sold it ever again. And if you're wondering why, that's because it was such a bad vehicle. When it came out, the original people that bought it literally got refunded the entire amount of money they spent in gold, and they got to keep the tank. So if you ever see somebody running this tank, they are an OG player. As I said, it's not too bad anymore because Wargaming keeps on buffing it, but it's still not the easiest or most exciting vehicle to run, and it's been buffed so many times, so I can imagine just how bad this vehicle would have been if you had gotten it when it first came out. Finally, hitting the number 1 spot, we have the Vindicator. Now this was not a hard choice by any means. I know the Vindicator, I have like 500 games in it. I actually think it's a fun tank to play, and while I think it is a fun tank to play, it is not a good tank to play. The only reason I like it is because it has the gun from a Sturmtiger. Now it really doesn't, because if they put that in the Blitz, you'd have to do like 2,000 damage a shot, but it does 640 damage a shot, which is really, really good at tier 7, and it's got decent pen values, and that's about all that it goes for it, because you look at the shells, and well, it gets heat, and it gets heat, and it gets high explosive, which means that if you're ever trying to shoot anything through a little bit of rubble, or a wall, or even a fence post sticking up, oh, whoops, your shell disintegrated in the fence post, and you couldn't damage them. Second of all, your premium rounds don't have the highest amount of pen, which means you might struggle to penetrate the enemy. Because it does shoot heat, it has terrible shell velocity, and it also is a very slow, immobile tank. It actually does move decently for how big it is, but it's a huge target. The sides of this vehicle are only about 85 millimeters thick, which means that if you're using any 152 millimeter, well, there goes 1,000 hit points off the side of it. The rear of it also HE-able with any 152s. I think even 120s can get high explosive in the rear, which means that the rear of this tank has absolutely zero armor. Not to mention, the frontal armor on this tank, you think, oh, it has a plow, it's going to be really good at ramming people. In fact, you'd think it'd be the best ramming tank in the game. Well, would you believe that this thing weighs less than some of the light tanks at tier 8, making it awful for ramming vehicles? I rammed the Type 62 Dragon one game, and it turned out that I lost more hit points than the 62 Dragon lost. My tank has a literal plow on the front of it. No clue how that makes sense. And if that wasn't bad enough, you look at the gun depression. It is sitting at a whopping 2 degrees. This tank has the worst gun depression out of every single vehicle in the entire game. So literally, you're on a map, let's say, like Falls Creek, and you'd push your tank, or I push my heavy tanks right next to the building in that bush spot. Well, flash news, you literally cannot aim down at the enemy opponents. You have to literally face down on them to be able to aim up, because it has decent gun elevation, it just can't aim down for the life of it, and that is really hard to do, judging that it's such a tall and immobile tank. It does a really bad job pretty much at every single scenario it gets stuck in. So in simple terms, do not buy a Vindicator under any circumstances. If you did buy it and you enjoy it, well, you're pretty much just a lunatic like me. So if you liked this type of video, please make sure to let me know in the comments down below. If you disagree with any of the tanks that I have listed here, of course this is an opinionated video, but I'm not listing any tanks that are below tier 5 or 6, because of course then it's not really underpowered premiums. It's just tanks that suck at low tiers, and nobody really plays low tiers. If you spam low tiers, well, I can't help you much there. But this video I wanted to highlight some of the higher tier premiums that aren't the best in the game. So let me know if you agree with my opinions in the comments down below. As I said, of course, if you like the channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, as it does help out it so much. But other than that, guys, I hope you're all doing well out there, and I'll see you in the next one.